What a beautiful venue. Hope you all have had an opportunity to view some of the static displays and some of the things that we have on the edge there, the various other tables and things. Well, good evening. My name is Richard Perez. I'm the president and CEO of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's Aerospace Hall of Fame. It is my complete and total honor to be here today and MC today's event. As you all know, we are here to celebrate the 2017 San Antonio Aviation and Aerospace Hall of Fame. Tonight we celebrate something very substantial that this community has had for many, many years, and that is a long and deep aerospace legacy. And you're going to hear all about it in a little bit. At this time, we're going to go ahead and kick off the event, and so I'll ask you to please stand and join me in the presentation of our colors. Our colors will be presented today by the St. Mary's University Marian Guard, and then we'll have the singing of the national anthem by Staff Sergeant Nikita Fox, who is with the 323rd Army Band, Fort Sam's own.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
We could not make tonight happen but for the fantastic, generous support of the San Antonio business community. In your program, we have highlighted all of the partners that joined us and assisted in making tonight special. One of these sponsors who showcased their support from the beginning to include the usage of this beautiful facility for tonight's event is our platinum sponsor, GDC Technics. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Richard M. Francie, Jr., GDC Technics San Antonio General Manager, to the podium for a few words.
Thank you for coming. What a wonderful, wonderful evening. You know, we at GDC in the business aviation and VIP market hold a very dear place of D. Howard in our heart. You know, he was an absolute pioneer in innovation, in aircraft design, modification, and completions. And some of our employees here in San Antonio and Fort Worth can actually look at their personal family trees and see a connection to D. Howard. This is special for us. So thank you for letting us share our facility with you. So on behalf of the senior executive leadership of GDC and our ownership, welcome, enjoy yourself, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to introduce Mayor Ivy Taylor. Mayor Taylor was elected in June 13, 2015. Prior to her election, she earned an appointment to the seat from her city council colleagues back in July 2014, making her the first African-American woman to serve as mayor of this city. of a city of more than 1 million people and only the second mayor in the city's history to serve as mayor. Mayor Taylor is focused on making San Antonio a globally competitive city where all residents are connected to opportunities for prosperity. To achieve this, some of the mayor's initiatives include developing a sustainable city budget, very important, amending the comprehensive master plan, creating a job-friendly environment, growing the workforce, investing in human capital, establishing affordable and livable communities, and building and maintaining basic infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Mayor Taylor to the stage.
Thank you, Richard, for that kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. It is certainly my pleasure to be here tonight to welcome you to the San Antonio Aviation Aerospace Hall of Fame dinner. And as we look at all those beautiful aircraft around us, our thoughts are on the San Antonio skies, which have been the backdrop to many types of aircrafts. Our city has been home to many champions for air travel, from pilots to men and women who wrote chapters in global aviation history to those who fought to keep our airfields open and operational. And so I'm certainly excited to be here to help recognize the many champions that will be honored tonight and inducted into the Hall of Fame. If you look in the history books or online, as we do these days, you can read about San Antonio's aviation and aerospace history. It certainly is captivating. All those persons who will be inducted tonight played a critical role in aviation, each in their own time, in their own way. And it's especially meaningful that we're honoring them this year tonight at Port San Antonio. More than 100 years ago, the U.S. Army brought its first flying center to Fort Sam Houston, but after a few years of test flights and some crashes, it was considered too dangerous and flying was forbidden at the fort. A few years later, however, a local newspaper at the time, does anyone remember the San Antonio Light? Well, the San Antonio Light predicted that the city of San Antonio would be the most important military aviation center in the U.S. Well, it turns out the Light was right. Unfortunately, that didn't prevent them from going out of business. But anyway, I digress. 100 years ago, this past January, is when the land for Kelly was first leased, and it was named after Lieutenant George E.M. Kelly, who had suffered a head injury during one of those early training missions and later died. His legacy lived on at Kelly Field, later renamed Kelly Air Force Base, and now Port San Antonio. And this year, we are proud to be celebrating 100 years of Kelly, and what a century it has been. As we remember the history and the people who got us to this place, I'd like to take a brief moment to look ahead. I'm grateful to Chair Wayne Fagan and everyone who's part of the D. Howard Foundation, not only for establishing this Hall of Fame and hosting tonight's dinner, but what they're doing to encourage aviation and aerospace with our next generation. When I learned about the Foundation's pre-K through 12th grade initiative, I had my staff reach out to one of the schools that's been involved. And I believe there's some representatives here from the Rhodes Middle School that I met briefly, and also from the San Antonio ISD Foundation. And both of the folks that are here today have seen those kids in aero action thanks to the D. Howard Foundation. Ms. Davis, who's an 8th grade teacher at Rhodes Middle School, her students watched a helicopter land on their school's track. They then visited NASA, and they got to land a plane through a flight simulator. Some of the students shared comments with my staff about their experiences. A young lady named Selena Flores said, "Not only did I get to see classroom lessons in action, but I also witnessed the important role that women had and still have in science." Victoria, yeah, let's clap for that. Girl power. And then Victoria Guadiano said, "Going to NASA was definitely the highlight of my year, and it's something I'll always remember." And Angel Prado told us, "If not for the D. Howard Foundation, I would not have been so sure following my career as a robotics engineer. After attending a school trip to NASA, I came to the realization of my passion for robots and mechanics, that it could be one day be used to help mankind reach the stars." Wow, I often share my vision of San Antonio as a globally competitive city where every resident is connected to opportunities for prosperity. Well, the D. Howard Foundation is providing those opportunities for our students, and for that I am very grateful and thankful. I'm also grateful to all of tonight's honorees for the role they've played in aviation history and in San Antonio's history. Thank you and congratulations to you all. And I would like to recognize Roland Maurer, who's President and CEO of Port San Antonio. Thank you for hosting us here at the port and for the work you do in continuing to develop Port San Antonio. And one final thank you to all of you that are here tonight. Thank you for the role that you play every day as a member of our great, thriving, and high-flying city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor. We appreciate you being here with us tonight. We appreciate your words, and we appreciate your continued focus on this community. Now I'd like to introduce and ask to come forward the President and CEO of Port San Antonio, Roland Maurer. Roland Maurer has been in our community for a short period of time, but has shown an amazing focus on aerospace, on economic development, on cybersecurity, on infrastructure, and on all things good. And for that, we'd like to thank you, Roland. Please come on up and give us a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Richard. I'd like to take a moment as I start this evening to thank a number of people that are here with our team from Port San Antonio. First of all, Richard, I introduced our board members that are here. If all of our board members could stand up and be recognized again, as well as we have a number of senior leadership folks from Port San Antonio staff that are here tonight. If you could stand up and be recognized one more time, I'd appreciate it. Come on, please stand up. These are the guys that truly make it happen. Our board giving us direction, and the staff making things happen, and I really appreciate the efforts of all. And many thanks to the Aviation Aerospace Hall of Fame for all of your work in putting together this terrific event. This is an evening that celebrates our shared history and allows our San Antonio aerospace community to highlight our big plans ahead. As we can see in the exhibit area, and in speaking to a number of guests, the tremendous amount of efforts that are taking place to grow business, advance research, and prepare the next generations of aerospace talent. Wayne, where are you? There you are. You may not be able to move mountains yet. I think you're getting there pretty quick. But judging from tonight's event and nearly 500 people in this hangar, and looking at all the aircraft both outside and inside this hangar that you've persuaded folks to lend to us tonight, you're getting close to being able to move mountains even in Texas. We are so appreciative for all your efforts and for partnering with our great customer GDC Technics in bringing this event to our property. As you know, this is a big year for us at the port and for our Air Force partners and friends at Kelly Field. Back in 1917, just a few hundred feet just outside those doors, Kelly Field was born. On this site, aviators and thousands of men and women who supported them over the years wrote chapters in local, regional, national, and global aerospace history. This year, we celebrate 100 years since the launch of Kelly Field. It was the backbone of Kelly Air Force Base. And today, just outside these hangar doors, it continues to serve as the continues to serve as the backbone for us, the port, and for our partners at JBSA Lackland. Today, and over the past century, thousands of people across generations and throughout our community owe their careers to the opportunities created at Kelly Field. That's what we're remembering in 2017. And that's what's inspiring us at the port as we set our sights on continuing to modernize and expand this great asset. Thanks to our partners and customers, we are creating new opportunities in aerospace, defense, global logistics, and other industries along South Texas' longest runway and one of our nation's most historic runways. We look forward to you joining us in this next year of celebration and remembrance. And we hope you keep up with us at the port as we continue to expand a place where people can focus their talents and energy to build their futures. Again, Wayne, thank you for all you've done to shine a bright light on the port and to aviation and aerospace industries in San Antonio and to celebrate those successes. Congratulations to our distinguished honorees this evening, and a special thanks to Senator Hutchison, who 20 years ago was an essential partner with this community as Kelly transitioned to what it is today, Port San Antonio. We are honored that all of you are here tonight. We look forward to a big year of celebrations, and with your support, we look forward to making big things happen here and in the century ahead. Thank you very much.
And happy 100-year anniversary. Lastly, before we break for our meal, I'd like to call the chair of the D. Howard Foundation forward. Wayne Fagan was the gentleman that masterminded this event. It was his idea, his concept, his thought, his work, his toil, and a lot of arm twisting that got us to here today. But I can tell you this, it is a fantastic event. It is the right thing to do because of our rich history, and we can't thank you enough, Wayne.
Thank you to each and every one of you for being here. Each and every one of you, in your own way, contributed to this evening and contributed to not only our past, but our future. And I, for one, believe that our future will be greater than our past, and our past has been pretty good. As Dick Francie mentioned, this facility has a history with D. Howard, as does VT SAA at San Antonio International Airport. And as we were preparing for this event, I couldn't help but think back over how all of this started, this being this facility. And I'd like to just take you back to 1981 when Dee was contacted by someone in Saudi Arabia and said that King Fahd was looking at buying a 747-300 as a head of state aircraft, and would D. Howard be interested in talking to them about it, bidding on it. So at that point in time, D. Howard had 250 employees at San Antonio International Airport. No wide-body hangars. And so Dee got interested. Dee went to Saudi Arabia, he came back, and by May 26, 1982, to be specific, Dee signed the contract with King Fahd's representatives to do what we call 747-3G1, which is the first wide-body head-of-state aircraft ever done anywhere in the world. There was no industry for wide-body aircraft because of the technical problems, particularly if one wanted to put in an elevator going from the cargo bay to the upper deck. Particularly if one wanted to have a state-of-the-art hospital room with a camera that was connected by Inmarsat satellite to the Cleveland Clinic, so doctors at the Cleveland Clinic could assist if there was any medical attention required. And particularly since it was going to be the first use of the Inmarsat satellite, which had not yet been commercially authorized. Those were a few things. There was one other tiny element. The Saudis insisted, and it was a contractual obligation, that the aircraft be in a hangar. They didn't want their aircraft outside. Well, I pointed out to Dee that we didn't have a wide-body hangar in San Antonio at his facility or elsewhere other than Kelly, which was still operational at the time. And I kept reminding him of this as we got closer and closer to finalizing a deal. So Dee and I were in London. He finalized the deal on May 26, 1982. The aircraft was scheduled to arrive before the end of the year. And I said, Dee, by the way, we're supposed to have this aircraft in a hangar, and we don't have a hangar. And Dee said, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. And by the end of the end of that year, 1982, around Christmas Eve, the nose of that aircraft, 747-3G1, was being towed into a 747 hangar at the D. Howard Company. So the company grew, not only because of that, because of other things we were doing simultaneously, to 750 people, 850 people, 1,000 people, 1,250 people. We started getting a lot of attention from companies around the world that were interested in acquiring the D. Howard Company. One of those people that was interested was a gentleman by the name of Tony Ryan, who was from Ireland. And Tony headed up a aircraft leasing company, which was the largest aircraft leasing company in the world at the time, called GPA, Guinness Peak Aviation, which was later acquired by GE, became GE Capital. So Tony was in San Antonio for a meeting with us, and Tony tried to convince Dee to open a facility in Shannon, Ireland, and was talking to Dee about, you know, how great it would be and what kind of incentives there would be. And Dee said no. He said no. He said, if I'm going to expand, I'm going to expand in San Antonio. San Antonio is my home. That's where we will expand, and that's where he did expand. So those two things about having confidence in the people of San Antonio in terms of committing to build a hangar when he hadn't even selected a contractor, and later on telling Tony Ryan, if I'm going to expand, I'm going to expand in San Antonio. So we fast forward to now. And the point is that I was thinking, what great stories. You know, we talk about the history, we talk about the 100 years, but these are people. These are people, and wouldn't it be great if more people knew the stories? And we have the stories of the honorees tonight. We have the stories of the honorees last year, and I have 80 some odd nominees sitting on my desk of potential honorees, and they keep multiplying, they keep growing. And so we wanted to tell those stories, to show people what happened here in detail, to inspire them to emulate those people. So the honorees here tonight inspire us to follow in your footsteps and do great things. Now, there were a lot of people were introduced by Richard, and deservedly so, and there are more. But I want to just introduce three people, just mention three people. They don't know I'm going to do this. But in doing this labor of love, sometimes, one of the great honors is meeting so many people, particularly from the military community, who I've had the honor of meeting over the last couple of years. And I want to just mention three people, and we have a video on one of them. One of the gentlemen that I've had the honor of working with and meeting is Colonel Ed Garland, U.S. Air Force, retired. Lives here in San Antonio, goes about his own business. Ed was a fighter pilot in Vietnam. And on his 70th mission flying out of Thailand, he was shot down. He and his crewmate were shot down over North Vietnam. Bailed out, had a broken back as a result of the bailout. His crewmate was killed in trying to evade capture. He evaded capture, and the U.S. military helicopter, rescue helicopter, flew into North Vietnam and picked him up and extracted him. I'd also like to introduce to you Dr. Tom McNeish. Dr. McNeish lives here, quietly, goes about his own thing. He was also a fighter pilot in Vietnam, also flying out of Thailand, but they didn't know each other. And on his 45th mission over North Vietnam, he was shot down and captured and was a POW for 6.5 years. Thought about what he wanted to do with his life when he was reborn, as he said. And he decided that he wanted to be a doctor, recovered from his stay in the POW, and went to medical school and stayed in the Air Force and was an Air Force doctor until his retirement. The third person we talk a lot about the 100-year history of Kelly. And well, it's good to think about the people that worked here and built that history and were a part of that history. And I'm sorry I'm going to have to use notes because I didn't have the honor of meeting this gentleman until this evening. But I would like to just read this bio on this gentleman by the name of Joe Glosson. And Joe started work at Kelly in the 1940s, and then he went into service, and he was in the Army, I believe, and then he was part of the invasion of Normandy. He was wounded. He was a Purple Heart recipient. He also received the Liberation of France Legion of Honor from the French government. He returned to Normandy as part of the celebration a few years ago. And after the war, he came back, and what did he do? He worked. He got his job back and worked at Kelly in civil service for the rest of his career. And I was told recently that he was taken on a tour of one of the hangars here that was built at the time that he was working here. So I just want, as one example, and there are many stories like that, but as one example, the port has prepared a video on Joe Glosson for you to meet Joe Glosson, and I would like the AV people to show that video at this time if they may.
I served in the 9th Infantry Division. We came off of a troop ship on rope ladders. I landed on Utah Beach. The day I was wounded, I went to this lieutenant and told him I'd been wounded. And while I was talking to him, he got killed. I had a feeling if I ever get back in the United States, the war will be over. Happy I did it, but I wouldn't want to do it again, and I hope nobody else has to do it. I got home on Christmas Eve Day of '45 and went back and started my career again at Kelly. Yeah, when I first got to Kelly, they had what they call apprentice programs. Worked so much doing that, and then you get promoted. We worked on all the parts that came off of an airplane. Actually, my section had 4 units in it. It had tank and radiator, sheet metal manufacture, sheet metal repair, and wing and surface, and landing gear. We had a few B-24s, but our main one was B-52s. And then ended up C5As. Yeah, I ended up as a section chief. At that time I had about 800 people in my section. So I got to meet a lot of people, and I was on a lot of different projects. Yeah, I guess I was real fortunate because the people I had working for me, you know. I was working on when I bought my house, first house. It was really, really a good career, you know.
please join me in thanking Joe Lawson and all the people that he represents. God bless you all. Thank you.
Sherry Kafka Wagner, who is an extraordinary writer, author, urban planner, and historian. She donated her impressive private library to the iconic Emma Hotel, located at the Pearl. Her collection includes over 3,700 books, which now can be checked out by any guest of the hotel at their leisure. She is a city jewel who calls San Antonio home, and we thank her for her participation this afternoon. She will be joined in the first presentation by Bexar County Judge Nelson Wolf, and also assisted tonight by Lieutenant Colonel Joel Scott Miller, who is a reservist in the Army Dental Corps and has served in Afghanistan. He serves as the Senior Manager for Valero's Aviation Safety and Travel Services. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Late in life, Orville Wright was asked by an interviewer, "What was your best moment in flying?" And Mr. Wright replied, "The best experience was when I was in my room thinking about flying." Those who move the aviation field forward often are those who relish thinking and dreaming about the future, those with a vision about how to accomplish difficult tasks and break barriers. Tonight, we're going to celebrate women and men who have done just that and whose thoughts and efforts have made vital contributions to aviation and aerospace history. To present our first award, please welcome one of our community's most visionary thinkers, Judge Nelson Wolf.
Thank you. Well, I've known Kay for a day or two. We served in the Texas legislature at the same time and got to know her and saw her early skills as a legislator. And then for the last 25 years, during my time as mayor and then as county judge, I've gone through 4 BRACs. I think there was a total of 5, I believe, Kay. And during all that period of time, every time we went through one of the base realignment and closure committees, we always turned to Kay for leadership. She did a marvelous job of helping us with the military, of which she devoted so much of her time to as a United States Senator. And we were successful in warding off a number of them due to her hard work. And then we did catch a little problem in 1995, I believe it was, and they voted to close Cali. Now, all of us that came up and lived in this community had some tie to Cali. My dad worked here during World War II. And we thought that's probably the worst thing in the world that could have happened to us. But what Kay did, she went to work on it right away, was able to get President of the United States at that time, it was Bill Clinton, and she does believe in bipartisanship. I wish we had a few more people like that. And, and she was able to get a 5-year time frame before they actually closed. And I remember being here when the change came over, turning it over to the private sector. And so what we saw with her work was the greatest success in the revitalization of a former military base in the United States. This set the tone how we did it. And so today, when you come out to Cali, you see all the tremendous private companies that are out here. Air Force still has a presence out here. But it would have never happened without the great work of Senator Kay Bailey Hutchison. In addition, one quick remark, we would never have had the largest ecological restoration of an urban river in the United States had Kay not kept it alive for us, and we would have never had the World Heritage designation of the missions in the Alamo in San Antonio. So thank you, Kay.
Well, thank you. I can't think of anyone that I would rather have introduce me than Nelson Wolf, because I do think we have worked together longer than any 2 people in Texas politics. And I cannot, let me just say in the overview, one of the great things about working with San Antonio, which I was honored to do for 20 years in the Senate, is the leadership of San Antonio. The mayors, the county judge, it was a team with the business community that made this city go. Now, I'm going to tell you, in many cities that I worked with, the mayor and the county judge didn't speak to each other, much less know what the other one was doing. But I think the strength of San Antonio and Bexar County has been the long leadership of people like Nelson Wolff, like Phil Hardberger, like Mayor Thornton, who was there on that day in 1995 when we got the bad news. You have not only been blessed, but you've made the blessing in San Antonio by electing good people. And I just want to say a couple of things because that was a hard day for us in 1995. But I wanted to say a few people, and I'm going to miss so many because it was a team effort and it was a long effort. But several of the people are here tonight who were part of that long effort. This county judge was there from the beginning. Phil Hardberger was there at the beginning. Mayor Thornton at the time was certainly there at the beginning. Joe Cryer was the head of the Chamber of Commerce. Now that's the other thing that you all have really done well, because Richard Paris is great. Joe Cryer was there every day talking about what could be done, what more can we do to make sure that we have everything done in our community that we can. And I know Joe is here tonight, retiring as a city council member. And Mayor Ivy, you are doing a wonderful job, and I hear good things about you. And you're in a long line of great mayors, and I hope that you all continue to put good people in office who will work together. But I want to mention somebody who's not here tonight, and who is really the unsung hero of taking Kelly, taking the lemons we got, making the lemonade, and that is Joe Robles. Joe Robles was on the BRAC Commission, but he did not live in San Antonio at the time. He was a retired general, and he was appointed by Bob Dole from Kansas. And I called him when he was appointed, and I said, General, we don't know each other, but we're going to be really good friends when this is all over. And I talked about our Texas installations. Well, I was in the audience watching that vote in 1995, and of course was devastated that Kelly could really actually be closed with its long history for the Air Force. But I went back and I asked Joe Robles to meet with me in the back of the auditorium, and I said, what we need you to do is get report language in the final report that's going to go in. And Joe Robles, who did not have to do this and no one else did it, stayed over the weekend in the place where they were writing the report. And he put in the language that added private sector work for the Air Force could be done in a closed facility. And that is what allowed us to go forward in the 5 years and actually start getting Boeing and Lockheed and people who were going to do big plane work that really needed the places to do it, to start getting the contracts to stabilize Kelly as a great private facility for government work. And then we had a great support from that community, the Lockheed, Boeing, the aviation community, to also get the 60-40 maintenance requirement that was required. 60% had to be in a government, 40% could be private sector repair and maintenance. We got it to 50-50. And that's how Kelly was then able, in Port San Antonio, to do enough work that it gave us that stable base. And the one thing I said that day to all the people that we had on the phone call was, we will have more employees at what I didn't know was going to be named Port San Antonio, but we will have more employees at Kelly than we have today at Kelly when this is all over. And we do, thanks to all of you. Thank you.
And I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for this evening. Phil Hardberger served as mayor of San Antonio from 2005 to 2009. I had the distinct honor of serving with him for 2 years. My last 2 years on the city council were his first two, and we struck a very, very strong friendship and did a lot of good things together. It was truly an honor for me to serve with you, Phil, and to be your wingman. As you all know, Phil is an accomplished pilot and knows his way around a boat as well. In 1977, he piloted a single-engine plane to recreate Charles Lindbergh's flight across the Atlantic on the event's 50th anniversary. In 2007, Phil was honored by the Federal Aviation Administration with the Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award for 50 years of piloting planes safely. He's a judge, he's a mayor, he's a man of amazing leadership who showed this country what it is to be a city with heart when we accepted all of the poor victims of the hurricane from Louisiana. And they were housed right here in this base, and we were proud to do so. And it was an amazing time and really brought an amazing level of pride for all the citizens of this great community. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to hear our keynote speaker, the Honorable Phil Hardberger.
Boy, Richard, I didn't want to cut you off. I was kind of enjoying that, actually. You know, I can't think of a better place to be than right here. When Wayne asked me to be the keynote speaker, and by the way, Wayne, thank you so much for all the work that you have done on this organization. Hard to do, takes a lot of time. Sometimes probably people feel that you're a nuisance. I know, I've been there, you know, where you're, well, here they come again, you know, sort of thing. But you have really captured a very important part of San Antonio history. Wayne was a little bit hesitant to ask me to speak, but let me tell you something. Airplanes have been one of the largest, if not the largest part of my life. Several of you have mentioned my boat stories, and I love boats, but I loved airplanes first. And I've been around them most all my life since I was about 6 years old, and there's no group of people that I would rather talk to than pilots. Of course, I've gotten older now, about 10 o'clock I have to go to bed. But in the old days, I could sit with pilots and easily talk till 2 in the morning, especially with a little libation, and just hearing war stories, pilot stories, and so forth. And then I see these lovely, lovely planes around us. So what better way to spend 15 minutes, which might turn out to be 20, by the way, Wayne, but I'll try to keep it to 15 minutes. But I just want to say that I cherish being a member of the flying community. It is a club that no one can get into without learning how to fly. There's a lot of clubs, you can do a lot of good. But I am telling you, there's nobody I like to be around better than pilots, and no things that I'd rather be around than airplanes. And so it's great to be here. You know, San Antonio has really had more than its fair share of great builders and pilots. The first two names that come to my mind, there are others, most certainly, but is D. Howard and Ed Swearingen. I mean, those were true international giants. And they advanced aviation throughout the world. So I'm going to talk just slightly about each one. And it'll be quick because there are so many people in our aviation world here in San Antonio and here tonight that we really don't have time to speak in length. D. Howard was quite a character. By the way, he held 40 U.S. patents. He was the father of the jet engine thrust reversers. You know, when you're on an internet, you know, when you're on a commercial license, you can tell when they're on the ground, you know, you hear this whoo like that. That's a reverse thruster. And we really needed those with jets because jets land faster, and they're very slick, and they're hard to stop. We tried parachutes behind them. That was kind of awkward, but it was effective enough. But to actually have a lever in the cockpit that you could pull that would bring that airplane to a stop from 170 miles an hour, pretty good stuff. He made it. By the time he was 40 years old, and you heard part of that from Wayne Fagan, but Howard Aero, which was his company, already had 1,000 employees. He developed a lot of planes and a lot of parts of planes, but the Howard 250, the Howard 350, and the Howard 500, which is this gorgeous piece of work immediately behind me. And here's an interesting thing. Those three types of planes have never had a passenger fatality. Isn't that amazing? 3 planes flying around the world, no passenger fatalities. He worked, of course, Bill Lear did the Learjet. Learjet was the first popular businessman's jet. But he worked very closely with Bill Lear, and as a matter of fact, the first full-scale mock-up of the Learjet, long before it flew, was done in D. Howard's hangar right here in San Antonio. And after the Learjet, the whole market opened up for the business jet. He also had a way with words. In fact, somebody's collected about 100 of them. Well, I'm not going to tell you the 100, but I'll just give you a couple of samples. He said, you know, if you give a guy a barrel of nails and a hammer, he will figure out how to quit hitting his thumb before he gets to the bottom of the barrel. And then another one, which I can appreciate as lawyers, by the way, and I see some of my fellow lawyers as well as fellow pilots here. He says, when all else fails, tell the truth. Now I'm going to move on to another great, Ed Swearingen. He was an aeronautical engineer. How many of you know his educational background? 8th grade. He went to the 8th grade, never beyond it. But he was a guy that just fully understood airplanes, what made them go. Grew up on a farm, so he was tinkering with tractors and cars and everything, but the airplanes really fascinated him. He built an airplane called the SX-300 that broke all the speed records at the time. And the Swearingen Merlin and Metros are still flying throughout the world. He designed both of those aircraft. His reputation was such, he said, that there were always eager investors. As he put it, every time I decided I needed money, it walked in and surrendered. How about that, Kenny? His mind was always on the sky. My daughters accuse me of having my mind other places too when she's trying to talk to me, but his mind was really always on the sky. He left, that's what his daughter said at the funeral, and it's true. He left a worldwide heritage, and that's pretty good for an 8th grader, don't you think? Then I want to talk about the flyers, where I feel a particular affinity. And we can start with one of the most famous pilots of all time, Charles Lindbergh. He came here and was trained right here in San Antonio. Now, the truth is he did already know how to fly. In fact, he had a rattle-trap airplane that he had put together himself. But the commander of the base made him take it over to Stinson and keep it over there because he said it was too disreputable to have around military aircraft. Didn't want it to be seen on the same field. But eventually, he flew away, flew on to glory in his historic flight to Paris. But we did train him here in San Antonio, and I think we must have done a reasonably good job. We have also produced 3 other flying legends that come to mind here. 2 are women, 1 is a man, and they all have the same name, Stinson. Quite amazing. Catherine Stinson, she was the oldest. She was the first woman in the United States to get a pilot's license, men or women, the 4th. She was a famous barnstormer. She flew all across the United States, even all the way to China, and one of her signature things was she would put flaming torches on the ends of her wings and do acrobatics at night. Quite a little show. She was also the first woman that figured out how to do the loop-the-loop in an aircraft. So she had a great life of daring do. She died in her bed, though, at 86 in Santa Fe. And she's buried there. She was only 5 feet tall. She married a judge and a pilot called Manuel Artero, and there's a street in Santa Fe named after him where they lived. Marjorie was her little sister, and Marjorie became the 9th woman in the United States to get a license. She was just about as famous as her sister. She went into teaching flying to young cadets. It was, of course, I guess it was the Signal Corps then, which later became the Army Air Corps. But she taught them how to fly. They called her the Flying Schoolmarm. She actually was brought in, the only woman to be brought in to the Aviation Reserve Corps. It was a population of 1 woman. She, too, escaped the Grim Reaper far beyond her days, and she died at 79 years of age, just of natural causes. These women live very large and long lives. They survive by bravery, coordination, mechanical knowledge, and yes, a little luck. Between them, they took all the honors and then died peacefully with everybody praising them. The little brother, Eddie, was also a very skilled pilot. He had more hours than almost anybody in the United States. He had about 16,000 logged hours at that time. But unlike his sisters, who lived a long life, death overtook him when he was 38. He was flying an experimental plane over Lake Chicago, and had engine trouble, and he was trying to get the plane back. His wing hit a flagpole, and it cartwheeled, and he was killed. Well, I had a notable flying experience out of Stinson myself. First place, I flew there for 20 years, and it was a great experience flying out of there. You had to push back these big old hangar doors. There was no mechanical device to help you, and then there would be this sea of airplanes, and they're all on top of each other in the tails and the wings. There's a lot of opportunities to hit another airplane or have them hit you while you're trying to push these heavy airplanes out. I took, though, a single-engine wood and fabric aircraft. It was a Blanca, for those of you who know the airplane, Sitka spruce, on the 50th anniversary of Lindbergh's flight, and I landed at Le Bourget Field, which was the same airport that Lindbergh had landed in 50 years earlier. We both landed on May 21st, his 1927 and mine 1977. I won't tell you everything that happened there because that's a story in itself. But I will tell you one thing, because after all, you have to have a little war story here. I needed a long-distance communication device. I had a VHF. If you get enough altitude, you might get 50 miles out of that you can talk to somebody. But we needed to talk going across the Atlantic, and so we put in a long-distance radio. We cut a hole, literally took scissors and cut a hole in the bottom of the airplane, and made a little spool, a little wooden spool that had a little wooden brake that would catch. And it was all wrapped up with this copper wire, which when you wanted to talk, you would let it out. It would go about 80 feet. And it would string out behind you, and you could talk several hundred, if not several thousand miles. It was pretty effective. I had experimented with it in San Antonio, but I had never really done it in the air. So off of Newfoundland, Canadian Control, asked me to give a position report. Well, I think this is the time to use this little homemade gadget that we have. So I reached down and just flicked off the little wooden brake, and something about the sound of this then happened almost immediately. Boom! And all was quiet. The antenna was gone. The wooden spool was still spinning. And then the question was, do I turn around and go back to Newfoundland and land, or do I keep trucking? I kept trucking, and that's how I got to Paris. Just one last, but I never talked to anybody entirely across the Atlantic. I kind of would look at the contrails where the airliners were and kind of figure, well, they're going that way, so I can stay pretty much in that direction. And it all worked out, but I had really worked at being able to land in Le Bourget Field, and they have instrument landing system, which at that time was the most accurate landing device you had. Crosshairs and all that would help you. So I had studied that, and from the time I hit the English coast, I had that thing memorized, that I was going to land on this using this ILS, which was a precise device. English is the language of aviation, but it's not like most English you've ever heard before when it comes through a French accent and a rather poor quality radio. So he began to say something, the controller did, but I couldn't understand him. So I kept saying, say again, say again. I was listening for that ILS, ILS 14 or whatever it was, but I wasn't hearing ILS 14. So about the third time he did it, and by the way, I was in solid instruments and had been for quite a while, to my horror, I interpreted. He was telling me I had to land ADF, which is basically just points towards the radio. That's an ADF, and that's how it's done. It's anything but very accurate. So now I'm letting down over the city of Paris in solid conditions with an ADF that I probably practiced before that, about 10 years before, since I had flown an ADF approach. When I broke out at 400 feet, all I could see were apartment buildings on both sides and boulevards. Luckily, though, I did see out in front the runway. A bit off to the side. Wasn't really quite as accurate as one would like, but good enough to get me down to the ground. Well, time runs short. I don't really want to take any much. So I'm going to tell another little war story, and then I'm going to quit. This little war story, though, I was just an observer. And Sherry, you may have heard this story, and I know Linda has. As I said, I'd become interested in flying as a small boy. My father actually was terrified of flying. He wouldn't get close to an airplane. But I had 3 uncles that had airplanes. We lived out in the country, and at that time, there wasn't a paved road within 50 miles. There wasn't any electricity within 300 miles, as far as I know. But that had one advantage when you're flying, because it meant those dirt roads were not encumbered with telephone poles, electrical poles, and wires. You didn't have to look out for them. They wouldn't be there. That would have been a miracle, because they hadn't come to the U.S. and rural part of West Texas. So my uncles used to come up on a regular basis, and they'd land on this dirt road where cars were going as well, but there weren't many cars. So you'd land on the dirt road, and then you'd taxi up to wherever you were. One day, my uncle Ployes flew up from Ozona, Texas, to pick up some eggs for his family use. And he had a big family. And he picked up 12 dozen eggs. We got it all in the plane, and he strapped himself in, and he started down this country road. My dad and I were waving him goodbye, he had on boots. And apparently boots are really not the absolute best flying equipment, because his left boot with a high heel slipped off the pedal and got between the firewall on the left side and the pedal itself. The pedal was fully depressed, which meant that makes the plane turn left, and if you're trying to take off straight, that's not desirable. So we didn't know what was happening, but it seemed kind of peculiar what he was doing, because he kind of took off as the plane gained a little flying speed and then just made a slow roll to the left and hit in a great cloud of dust. Well, my dad, it was probably a half a mile from where we were standing. We ran all the way up there, expecting the very worst, and maybe he's dead, who knows. My dad, an airplane was a very foreign invention to him, but in any case, he opened the door, make sure what was the fate of my uncle. Well, my uncle was the center of an omelet. Every single egg had broken, and he was the centerpiece, and he was hanging upside down, dripping eggs from every way. My dad, very excited and tried to effectuate a rescue, he undid his seatbelt. Well, that wasn't a good thing either, because he went straight down on his head and hit the iron superstructure on that airplane and gave him a pretty nasty cut. That was the only wound of the event. But now we have an upside-down plane on a dirt road. This is not satisfactory. We've got to do something. So we got the tractor. My uncle was fine. But we got the tractor, and we went up there, and we tried to turn it over. And we got some cables and attached it to one wing. Remember, it's upside down. Well, we did finally get it turned over, but we broke off a wing for all the practical purposes and a part of the horizontal stabilizer of the tail. Nevertheless, we got it back on its wheels again and took it up to our yard and awaited developments. Well, the developments did come, but it wasn't what we expected, because we had cows, and the cows got out, which wasn't so unusual. And the cows discovered all of these fabrics, were put together by dope. I don't really know what it was called, but it was called dope, and all those men have done model airplanes, know what dope smells like when you put them together. It smells pretty good. Well, these cows, this dope was much more appealing to them than hay. So the sum of all of this was we had to call my uncle, who had long since gone back to his home, and say, "Please, I'm sorry to tell you, but the cows have eaten your airplane." Okay. Well, we could tell some more, but I know all of you could tell some more too. So let's just say this. May all of you always have plenty of runway in front of you, fair skies above you, and the wind beneath your wings.
This is a very special one, and we have it autographed by about 5 of the Flying Tigers. There's not a lot of these left, and we wanted to present this to you tonight. Hopefully in your Phil is great room that you can find a really nice place to hang that.
Beautiful, and I love the airplane. And I was actually trained by one of the Flying Tigers.
Were you really?
Yes, because I was doing so poorly when I started, they felt they needed to get somebody that had a lot more guts than my instructor. So he made a pilot out of me because he didn't care. I mean, it's just whatever you want to do.
There you go.
Try it.
Well, thank you very much for all you have done for aviation and for the city of San Antonio. Congratulations.
Enjoy. Thank you. That's
yes, sir.
Again, thank you, Don.
One of the pleasures great pleasures in my life was being asked to write and produce a KLRN show, Wings Over the Alamo, which allowed me to learn a great deal. I'd worked in Dayton with the Wright family and the Wright Brothers Foundation and the celebration of the 100 years of flight in the historical parks there. But I didn't really know much about San Antonio's history, and It was full of wonderful stories, just, oh, so many. I mean, I cannot even begin to tell you how many wonderful stories I heard during that time. And one of the great stories was about two businessmen who recognized right away the importance of aviation. William B. Tuttle and L.B. Clegg recognized that there needed to be something in San Antonio, and even before Benjamin Floyd got here with his plane, Mr. Tuttle arranged for Louis Paulhan, who had flown the first flight in Texas down in Houston. He arranged for him to come to San Antonio and fly here a short few weeks before Benjamin Floyd made his flight. These two gentlemen felt that aviation had to be part of the city's future. They alternated as chairman of the Military Affairs Committee of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, and they helped to establish Kelly Field. In 1927, they created the San Antonio Airport Corporation to lead the effort to make certain that the proposed West Point of the Air would come to San Antonio. When there was not sufficient time for the city to secure the land and raise the money to buy the land for the proposed field, Mr. Clegg, joined by 3 other business leaders, personally borrowed a total of $546,000, 1927 dollars, from local banks for the airport corporation so they could purchase the necessary land. The city later acquired the land from the corporation and donated it to the military for Randolph Field. This action not only brought Randolph Field here, but it assured the future of Kelly Field, which was threatened with closure if the new airfield had gone to another city. These two men, Mr. Tuttle and Mr. Clegg, helped shape the future, not only of our city, but of aviation. Our next honoree, after she graduated from the University of Puerto Rico, Olga Custodio worked in the accounting department of Puerto Rican National Airlines before she joined the United States Air Force, where she became the first Latina to complete the U.S. Air Force military pilot training. She was the first female to become a Northrop T-38 Talon UPT flight instructor at Lackland Air Force Base, and later she became the first female T-38 instructor pilot at Randolph. She retired from the military with the rank of lieutenant colonel, then became the first Latina captain for American Airlines. With so many firsts to her credit, Lieutenant Colonel Custodio is continuing her work as the executive director of the Alamo chapter of Women in Aviation. Please welcome Lieutenant Colonel Olga E. Custodio.
Good evening, everyone. It's so great to be here with a crowd of aviation and aerospace supporters, and in San Antonio, and especially at Kelly Air Force Base, Port San Antonio, that is celebrating 100 years. So imagine you're a pilot of an aircraft climbing through about 100 feet right after takeoff, and suddenly there's a loud bang. The windscreen goes dark for a split second, and the next thing you see is blood and feathers. So there I was, as most pilots starting a flying story begins. I can say this was one of the many defining moments in my aviation career, but what came before was more essential. My parents always made me feel safe, secure, and loved. They encouraged me to explore and experience everything I became passionate about. I always felt that I could do anything if I put the effort into it. Growing up as an Army brat, my father gave me the best role model of sacrifice, service, and love of country. He fought in World War II and the Korean War and served over 23 years. Having the opportunity to have lived around the world gave me the understanding of different cultures and the respect for them. But more than anything, understanding that we live in the best country in the world. I appreciate everything about it because I was able to see how others live in their countries and their cultures. I learned to show respect in order to get respect. I encourage each one of you to maintain and protect our values and everything we as U.S. citizens stand for here and around the world. So there I was, looking at blood and feathers through my windscreen. I was a second lieutenant, student pilot at undergraduate pilot training in Del Rio, Texas. I was on a solo flight in my T-37, an initial jet training aircraft. I went right into emergency mode, applying everything I had learned at that point. Maintain aircraft control, assess the situation, and take the appropriate action. I landed safely without incident, met by emergency vehicles. I pulled off the runway, shut down the engines, and jumped out of the aircraft. Very happy to be back on the ground. 30 minutes later, reality set in, and my knees were shaking. But I knew that this is where I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to do. My motto is querer es poder. Translates to where there is a will, there is a way. But more importantly, I have been blessed to surround myself with family and friends who believe in me, encourage me, and support me. Pursuing to be the first was not my plan, nor was it my motivation. I followed my dream and passion to serve my country and fly. I do not forget all those who helped me along the way. They are just as important and part of the legacy I will leave behind. I want to thank Wayne Fagan, the D. Howard Foundation, and the San Antonio Aviation Aerospace Hall of Fame for this honor and award. This recognition is momentous, but not just for me. I truly believe it allows an opportunity of awareness for the young and the not so young, so they can realize that anything is possible if you follow your passion and have the patience to pursue it. I want to recognize and thank my family and friends who have come to support me here tonight. The Women in Aviation Alamo City Chapter, the Order of Dedalians, a military organization that supports military pilots, and the Puerto Rican Heritage Society. These are just some of the organizations where I volunteer, and there's many more, and my passion is to pass on as much as I can because I've been so blessed, and I need to get the word out that aviation and aerospace is the place to be. Some of these friends I have made along the way I have known for a lifetime, and others just for a few years. I am moved and I appreciate each and every one of you that took the time out of your busy life to be here tonight to celebrate this with me. I share this award with my parents, Ismael and Olga Nevares. If you could please stand. They are amazing. They have loved me, encouraged me, and pushed me. My husband, Edwin, who has always supported me, he's not going to stand, and so much more in 43 years we've been together. To my daughter, Marcia, who had to sacrifice not having a traditional mother since she was 3.5 years old, and still managed to grow up to be a strong, assertive, and beautiful woman. And my son, who flew with me in my T-38 before he was born. I didn't know I was pregnant at the time. But he is one of the most warm and wonderful human beings I know. And to my grandson, Jedi Justice. And yes, it is like Star Wars. Jedi, the sky's the limit. Find your passion and follow its path. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Carl Joseph Crane is an aviation pioneer and inventor who was born in San Antonio, and he studied at St. Mary's University and the University of Dayton. After graduating from the U.S. Army's Advanced Flying School here at Kelly Field, he became a flight instructor at Kelly, Brooks, and Randolph. In 1929, Colonel Crane teamed with Colonel William C. Ocker to devise revolutionary flying systems. Colonel Ocker was the first to teach instrument flying at Brooks Field. He successfully made the first instrument-only cross-country trip in history. On June 24, 1930, he flew from Brooks Field, nearly 900 miles, to Scottsfield, Illinois. The Crane-Ocker collaboration resulted in the invention of the pre-flight reflex trainer and the flight integrator, a navigational aid. In 1932, they co-authored the world's first manual for instrumental flight, Blind Flight in Theory and Practice. We are honored tonight to recognize their great contributions to aviation. We are pleased to have Colonel Crane's widow, Mrs. Pam Crane, with us tonight. And accepting the award on behalf of Mrs. Crane is Colonel W.R. Stewart.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is a lady here this evening from St. Louis who graduated from Webster College, who got the Exceptional Service Award from the Army Mapping Service for her work with them, who is herself a pilot, and who supported and devoted her life to Colonel Carl Crane and to his flight and to his fight for flying safety and for better instrument flight procedures. Would you join me in welcoming Mrs. Pamela Hoffman Crane? Mrs. Crane. Pam, I know that she can't stand. I know that she relishes your applause, and thank you. And I would like to express the appreciation of the Crane family for what honor is being given to Colonel Crane tonight. Let me leave you with two thoughts about him. First, how delightful it is that the D. Howard Foundation has selected a true San Antonian for this honor. He was born here. He was raised here. He pedaled his bike up to Fort Sam to watch Lieutenant Floyd fly that box-like aeroplane at Fort Sam Houston. He graduated from St. Mary's College. We had our colors tonight. In 1918. We sometimes forget that most colleges in those days had a high school attached. And actually that high school part of St. Mary's broke off by itself in 1932 and became Central Catholic. And he learned how to fly at Brooks Field and at Kelly, and he flew in that magnificent World War I epic Wings. And he did most of his research here in the 30s. And he came back here after he retired, and he pursued his invention. If you look on the internet, you'll find that that officer is credited with not one, not two, but 200 inventions in this country and 3 others. And at the time of his death, he was busy, engaged in more and inspirational inventions. My hat is off to him, and I hope you will join me again in thanking him for his service to our nation.
We have Colonel Coker's daughter was unable to be with us this evening, but we are very pleased to have Lieutenant Colonel William Recline, who is accepting the award on her behalf.
Say something as well.
Yes, of course, I want to. We need to get our picture
Okay,
and then we'll take.
All right, picture time.
Yes. Okay, now go right ahead, sir.
I like your size of your print. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and I want to express a warm thank you from the Ocker family, and that is the way he pronounced his last name is Ocker. We thought we would have him here. Doris and Clyde, her husband, her last name now is Osborne. She goes by Doris Ocker Osborne. They were going to be here as late as Saturday of last week, and unfortunately, her husband Clyde is having a mitral valve replaced, and so she didn't feel comfortable to come here by herself. So I asked her, Doris, what would you like me to say on behalf of your dad? And so she wrote just a couple paragraphs that I want to read to you from Doris. She wanted you to know, she says, my father, Colonel William C. Ocker, was born about 1880 in Philadelphia of German immigrant parents. He joined the Army in June of 1898 in time to fight in the Philippines in the Spanish-American War. In 1912, Captain Billy Mitchell approved his transfer to the Aeronautical Division in the Army Aviation School at North Island, San Diego, to repair and maintain Curtiss biplanes. He moonlighted at Curtiss Flying School, trading pay for flying lessons. He received pilot's license number 293 in April 1914. In 1916, he flew a scouting aircraft to 10,000 feet over San Diego Harbor. Later that year, he did 15 consecutive loops over the city. He was aide to and personal pilot for General Billy Mitchell in the early 20s. In 1917, he was commissioned a lieutenant and taught pilots to fly during the First World War. While inadvertently spinning his aircraft in a cloud, he thought he was turning in one direction, but noted oil dripping in the opposite direction. Dropping blindfolded pigeons out of his aircraft, he determined they could not fly without visual reference to the horizon. Dr. Elmer Sperry, a friend of his, loaned him a ship's gyro in 1918, which he attached to a strut, which enabled him to perfect needle ball and airspeed techniques for flying reference, with reference to an artificial horizon. Instrument training was introduced to students at the Advanced Flying School in Kelly Field in 1930. With his friend Colonel Carl Crane, they published the first textbook on instrument flying in 1932, Blind Flight in Theory and Practice. That book is quoted today verbatim in textbooks. Pan American Airlines used the book to teach their pilots how to fly into Mexico City in inclement weather. The Russian Air Force adopted his techniques before our Army Air Force fully accepted them. He received a patent and the use of the turn and bank techniques, but assigned it to the U.S. government. In 1926, his Ocker box, including the appropriate instrumentation, was attached to a Jones Barony rotating chair, becoming the first blind flying trainer. He invented the hooded pilot cockpit for teaching blind flying. He made many cross-country blind flights, as you heard, like the 900-mile flight from San Antonio to Scott Field in Illinois in 1930, but instrument landings were developed by others. Known as a problem solver, when pilots flying into Yuma around 1915 couldn't get their aircraft started again in the heat, he was sent there without forewarning of the problem. When returning on time,
he was queried by his commander responding, "When I landed, I ordered ice sent out from town." So that's how he solved the problem. In 1934, Orville Wright wrote this: "Except for Major Ocker's great zeal as a missionary, I doubt whether the course in blind flying would be a requirement in the Army today." The Army took exception to this zeal and sent him to Letterman General Hospital twice for psychiatric evaluation, as well as a court-martial. Colonel Ocker used to joke about having 2 letters proving he was sane. No other officer could show that proof. Both Orville Wright and Jimmy Doolittle witnessed for him during the court-martial. Amelia Earhart wrote him a letter on his behalf. He was acquitted. My dad was an excellent marksman, very proud of it, with many medals for rifle and pistol. Christmas, he would shoot holly branches out of the tree for my brother and me to retrieve. He was a quiet birdman and a dedalian. He was a quiet father and husband, receiving the love and respect of my mother, brother, and me. He set a great example to pursue education and commit to improving the lives of his fellow men and women. Doris Osborne. So thank you again from the Osborne family, and we thank you, and it's a great American hero. Thank you.
Our next honoree, Dr. Bernard Harris, Jr., graduated from Sam Houston High School here in San Antonio. He received a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Houston, then a doctorate in medicine from Texas Tech. After completing a residency in internal medicine at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Harris did research at NASA's Ames Research Center in California. His research was in the field of musculoskeletal physiology and disuse osteoporosis. He then joined NASA's Johnson Space Center as a clinical scientist and flight surgeon, and he became an astronaut. He logged more than 430 hours in space on 2 flights. He became the first African American to walk in space. Here is a short video about the distinguished Dr. Harris.
On April 26, 1993, Dr. Harris achieved his childhood dream when the Space Shuttle Columbia lifted off from Cape Canaveral. As a mission specialist, he conducted many medical experiments over the 10-day mission. It was February 9, 1995, when Dr. Harris made history by becoming the first African American to make a spacewalk. Today, Dr. Harris is a licensed private pilot, accomplished NASA astronaut, physician, successful businessman, husband, father, and friend. His drive for achievement is only topped by his passion to help young people follow in his footsteps. Dr. Harris currently serves as president of the Harris Foundation, a nonprofit organization he founded in 1998 to develop mathematics, science education, and crime prevention programs for America's youth.
Please welcome Dr. Bernard A. Harris, Jr.
Well, thank you so much for this award. I'm very honored, and especially to receive an award from my hometown. As you heard, I went to Sam Houston High School, so, you know, this is it. This is wonderful. I was telling someone coming in that what better place to receive an award as an aviator to then be surrounded by airplanes. I think that's been said before. So, Wayne Fagan, thank you for making this happen. I'd like to thank also the D. Howard Foundation for coming up with this award for those of us who I was going to say risk our lives, but we're actually risking our lives to do things that we love to do, and that is to fly, not only here on Earth, but for me, also in space. I want to thank my family that's here, Karin and Shantae. Can you guys raise your hand so they can see you? And thank you for your support, your love and support. This person was mentioned earlier, Tom Hendricks. And Tom, where are you? Way in the back. So I'm asking Tom, that's Tom and his wife Becky. So Tom is an astronaut and was responsible for me being here today, in that he was on his second mission, so he was a veteran, and I was a rookie on my first mission, and he was the pilot for that mission. So I don't know if you know that you have to be a little crazy to get on a space shuttle. And when we were practicing we have what we call a dry count, and you have to walk across this gantry and get into the spaceship and sort of practice. Well, I should mention that this gantry is about 150 feet off the ground, and it is not solid. It's great. So when you're walking across, you can actually look down and see the ground below. Now, even though I'm a pilot and I'm an astronaut, walking across that grate was somewhat daunting. And I don't know if Tom remembers this, but we also had a person with us that was also a pilot, also an astronaut, who was afraid of heights. And I have to tell you, looking down from there, I was a little afraid. But the fact that Tom had done it before, hey, if he can do it, I can do it too. Anyway, Tom and Becky, it's really great to see you. I would not be here if it wasn't for a group that was mentioned earlier, and that's the Tuskegee Airmen that are here today. And I want to thank these young men for braving the way, for those who are of darker persuasion to think about becoming not only aviators but an astronaut. Then lastly, just sort of a toast to the future. I believe there is a group of high school students here from Sam Houston High. Where are you guys? Can you stand up and let everybody see you? All right, fantastic. And there's also a group that's from Harris Middle School. Where are you guys located? I want to see where you are. I know the principal is here and the students are here. All right, great to see you. It's already been said that since coming back down to earth, one of the things that I think is so important, that is to make sure that we ensure that our young people have a future. And I believe that future starts with a dream. It did for me when I was 13 years old, looking at Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin land on the moon, and look at those black and white photos and television scenes, and to say that I could follow in their footsteps. So I'm hoping that the students at Sam Houston High and the students in Harris Middle School will look at me in that same way and be inspired not only to think about flying in space, but to accomplish whatever dream that they want to dream. I don't necessarily want to tell them what to do, but I want to make sure that they're enabled to do whatever it is that they want to do. And I think those of us who are aviators and who are astronauts are just a shining example of what can be accomplished if you follow your dreams. Thank you so much for this wonderful award.
In 1943, the 433rd Airlift Wing, the Alamo Wing, was organized as an active duty Air Force unit. In 1955, it was activated in the reserve at Brooks Air Force Base, and it moved to Kelly in 1960. 4 years later, the 433rd AW became the first unit in the Air Reserve Forces to win the coveted Air Force Outstanding Unit Award, an award it has won 3 more times since that first win. When Kelly Air Force Base closed, the 433rd AW realigned with Lackland Air Force Base, which currently is the host base. When mobilized, the 433rd D Airlift Wing provides aircraft, crews, support personnel, and equipment necessary to meet combat readiness objectives. The Alamo Wing is also the Air Force Reserve's only formal training union providing initial and advanced qualifications for C-5 flight for the total force, Reserve, Active Duty, and National Guard. To accept the award for the distinguished 433rd Airlift Wing, the Alamo Wing, please welcome the Wing's commander, Colonel Thomas T.K. Smith, Jr.
On a night of your honoring these giants in the aviation history, we feel honored, humbled, yet inspired, and the fact that at least we can fly a giant airplane. So if you haven't had a chance by the end of tonight, please, by all means, go out to the aircraft and get a quick tour by my crew. We've got them out there. And I tell you what, I never realized how much of San Antonio was in my blood. I trained in a T-38 over Randolph as an instructor pilot. I flew the Lear with D. Howard thrust reversers, and the majority of my career has been in the 433rd Airlift Wing. It's a deed, an honor, and a privilege. Thank you.
I want to thank all of you for coming tonight and being here to share this occasion and honor these very distinguished and accomplished people. Texas to me, I'm not a native, I didn't grow up here, I came here to college, but Texas to me has always been the big sky, the blend of big dreams and big accomplishments. Thank you so much.
We're going to just take a moment here real quick and talk about Wayne and thank Wayne. Wayne, you're a big thinker. You've inspired most of us in this room to be a big thinker and to do great things. And we have a small token. I have a long script here of about 45 minutes, but people want to go see the C5M out there. But we have a small token of appreciation for the efforts you've put in to create this magnificent event. If you just dropped in from Pluto tonight, you would think that this event has been going on for 10 or 15 years. This is the second event, and look at the turnout. This is just wonderful. So, Wayne, it's because of your vision and dedication. On this, it says, in sincere appreciation of Wayne Fagan for your tireless dedication and support of San Antonio's aerospace community, and in special recognition of your efforts in making the San Antonio Aviation Aerospace Hall of Fame an essential platform for our city's aerospace community to highlight and celebrate its successes. March 30th, 2017. Thank you, Wayne.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, well, thank you. That about does it for the program tonight. I want to again thank you all for coming, the dignitaries, the sponsors, and each one of you for being here today on this very special night. Clearly, we can see that the depth of aviation, of aerospace, of talent, of heart, of vision is deep, deep, deep in San Antonio, Texas. And so you all are a part of that now today by your presence here. But it doesn't end here today. It continues on and on and on. And so those young people that were referred to today and those yet to come are going to be our opportunities to continue to grow the aerospace industry in this community and throughout the world.